I'm the president of Lift Park Group. We've got, more than 50 of these shows that we've been doing all the way back since October, November last year. So we've been doing this DareGreatly podcast for twice a day, twice a day, that would be hard. Twice a week, Mondays and Wednesdays, going back all the way to October. So pretty happy about that. We do shows we do three kinds of shows. We have a news program like we're doing tonight. We have a policy deep dive, which a lot of folks don't really like very much, but they're super important, so we're going to continue doing them. And also guests. We have one-on-one conversations with guests. We did have a guest scheduled for tonight, but they've had to reschedule, so we'll have Les Johnson on in a couple days. I think it'll be next Wednesday, but we're not sure of that. We have some interviews tomorrow morning. We're going to be hosting the Space Frontier Foundation's guest tomorrow morning. I can't tell you who that is yet, but it's going to be pretty interesting. It's somebody that I don't know in the industry, so that's going to be super fun to kind of be in the background for that. We are the host and the producer of the Space Frontier Foundation's programming. They are doing this show called Pioneers of Commercial Space, and it's part of their 35th anniversary outreach of the Space Frontier Foundation program. So pretty happy to be hosting that. Also, we host the Red Planet Live for the Mars Society. So two of the largest, I would say, some of the most important and more influential communities in the space community. The Space Frontier Foundation and Mars Society certainly have had an outsized influence in our industry. They've been a client of ours for, well, one's only 4 months and one's been almost 7 months, 6 months, something like that. So pretty happy to have both of them. Thank you. We're grateful to that. And then just had some good news this week. Both of those clients are not only extending their agreement with us, but also expanding it. So you'll see the results of that here in the pretty near future. Pretty happy about that. So thank you, folks, for your continued support of us. So we have the three kind of shows. We have a policy deep dive, we have a news program, and a interview. We also look at three main areas, right? We look at the money of space, the commercialization, capitalization. We look at the national policies, both the United States and abroad, because policy is pretty important. And we look at infrastructure, like who is building what are they doing? And that we've got some news coming up on that. We've got some expansions of our programming coming up really soon. So stay tuned for that. That's pretty exciting for us. We currently host 3 hours of programming every week, which doesn't seem like a lot, but a lot of hours go into those 3 hours. A lot of labor goes into those 3 hours. So pretty happy about that. And I think we're going to start expanding that in the near future. So watch for that. That's going to be fun. Tonight's episode is really looking at the news. There's been actually quite a bit of interesting news and papers coming out this week. So we're going to dig into that for a bit. It's a lot, so I'm going to try and go somewhat fast. So just bear with me. We're also trying to kind of like make our format a little bit more crisp. So stick with me. This could be a bumpy ride, or it could be fun. So with that, we're going to jump straight into it. So this article, let me get a link here and share the screen. This article, Returning to the Moon Can Benefit Commercial, Military, and Political Sectors, a space policy expert explains. I know this space policy expert. Dr. Borowitz was a student with me in my class in Barcelona back 15 years ago, unimaginably 15 years ago. She has since gone on to go for her I believe, double master's and a PhD. So she's a professor at Georgia Tech. Curiously, I have not been to Georgia Tech since she's been a professor. We've kind of crossed paths there. I used to go to Georgia Tech quite a bit in the early days working on the Earth elevator. We did some experiments with them at Mars Desert Research Station. Anyway, that's not really relevant. Dr. Borowitz has been really focused on the geopolitics of going to space. And she wrote a really interesting article about, kind of how we're going there, what we're going to do, talking about the several companies around the world, including both startups and established aerospace firms, who began working on missions to the moon. It's been great, and it's this. I because I know her a little bit. I know that this has been an area of interest going all the way back. She was in our same program back in Barcelona. She wasn't on this team. She wasn't on my team there, but she was aware of the Google Lunar X Prize and the commercial interests in going back to the moon all the way back 15 years ago. So pretty well-grounded person, really focused on this. Curiously, she references, for now, efforts to return to the moon are largely funded by government space agencies like NASA or the European Space Agency. However, many experts talk about the growth of a cislunar economy, where companies make money through their activities in and around the moon. Now, interestingly, that phrase, cislunar economy, comes from a guy named Murphy. He also was an ISUer, and he coined the phrase cislunar econosphere. But Dr. Borowitz points to a different article. I'm going to bring it up in a moment, so just bear with me on that. I'll reference this cislunar economy here in a moment. Companies entering the market early may have an advantage. Crowding is unlikely to be an issue in the near term. The moon has a surface area roughly the equivalent of the entire Asian continent. Even at the poles, multiple sites offer access to both water, ice, and solar illumination. I think that's pretty interesting, right? Like, look, it's a big place. I do want to point out, though, that yes, it's a big place, but there are some strategic points that are more valuable than other points. So that's something to keep in mind, especially in this next paragraph here. And people talk about being the size of the Asian continent. Other folks refer to it as the eighth continent. And I've always appreciated the imagery, the colorful imagery of calling it the eighth continent. I think that's very evocative and somewhat powerful. There is a military interest in the moon. We have talked about it on this show several times. In 2020, the head of U.S. Space Force, that would be Four-Star General Raymond, I think, referred to the moon as, quote, key terrain, and the Air Force Research Lab is funding an experimental satellite called Oracle, scheduled to launch in 2026. Oracle will monitor the space between the Earth and the moon. So we're gonna pull up that Oracle link as well. That's definitely worth paying attention to. Some individuals in the space sector go further and suggested the military should watch out for weapons hidden in deep space or on the far side of the moon. However, the physics and economics of space suggest that these uses are costly with little practical benefit. I tend to agree with that. Like there's value in monitoring, but deep space is deep space for a reason. So um, I would like to see some telescopes on the far side of the moon. I think that's pretty important. But when my team went down and visited with the chief scientist of the U.S. Space Force a couple of years ago, we had the coincident timing that we arrived just 3 days after China had landed a probe on the far side of the moon, a robot on the far side. And you can imagine things were a little tense during that conversation. So the Apollo program is famous for its role in the U.S. and Soviet mid-20th century space race. The United States' ability to land humans on the moon was interpreted by many around the world as evidence of U.S. technological superiority and the capabilities of a democratic and capitalist society. Some have suggested that the U.S. is now in a new space race, this time with China. So I definitely agree that we are. For a long time, I resisted that phrase until the administration came out with the word first about 4 months ago. They said that they were going to land and set up a base first. And just by making that one word, putting that one word in official doctrine, I think that officially puts us into a space race. And I think that's somewhat important. I think it's going to have some repercussions. The United States is seeking international support for the Artemis Accords, a set of principles for responsible lunar exploration and development. As of July 2023, this is the last day of July. Today is the last day of July. This says that 27 nations have signed the accords. It's actually 29 now because there were 2 more since this article was written, which I find kind of staggering. We're going to take a look at the Artemis Accords in a minute. I think this is a really interesting article. It's definitely worth reading. It's definitely worth following the links. The last piece here, ever since humans have last left the moon in 1972, many have dreamed about the days when people would return. But for decades, these efforts have hit political roadblocks. This time, the United States' plans to return to the moon are likely to succeed. It has the cross-sector support and the strategic importance to ensure continuity even during politically challenging times. So pretty interesting article here. It references several pieces, so I'm going to dig a little deeper into those pieces. So just bear with me for a moment. Here's another link in the article. This one is talking about the cislunar economy. It goes into some depth about recent developments from the new space industry have seen the appearance of a number of new companies interested in the creation of a self-sustained economy in cislunar space. Industries such as asteroid mining, moon mining, and on-orbit manufacturing require the existence of a developed economy in space for the business cases to close in the long term, without the need to have the government as a permanent anchor customer. So I'm going to point out that this article, also written by another person from ISU, Carlos created, it did not work, but he created a cislunar company. I'm not going to dig into his history there, but he created a cislunar company to focus on communications and observations. Ultimately, that company did not get funded, so he did not continue with it. But Carlos has a background, I'm pretty sure, with McKinsey as a consultant in their space sector. So that was crafted after he wrote this. He wrote this in December 2017. So his space company was born, slowly died and he's gone on to other things. But Carlos definitely has credentials in this field. So his paper is pretty interesting. There are some pieces that I don't agree with it. I don't like calling it the new space anything anymore. I think that we have gotten past the phrase new space in the same way that in 2003, nobody called a company a .com company anymore. Maybe that term made sense in 1998, even into 2001. But by 2005, nobody was building quote .com companies. What was happening was people were establishing their own digital strategies, but they weren't .com companies anymore. And I think that we're in the same spot now where there's no such thing as a new space company. Everything in space is a new space company. Even the old guard of Boeing, Lockheed, and Raytheon, they're still doing stuff in the new space economy, but it's not. The phrase new space had some relevancy in 2017 when this article was written, but in the last 2 or 3 years, it's really lost some of its weight. So pretty interesting stuff. Definitely worth looking at this article. You can download the article, the complete article here. But this project aimed to establish a framework for the study of the cislunar economy as a whole. Typical business studies and commercial space activities only focus on one activity and its connection to Earth. But the interconnectivity of the future cislunar economy calls for a more global view to properly inform business decisions. I 100% agree with that. I think that we have not yet had a document that really looks at this, the holistic element of going to space. I think that's important, and I think we're missing some stuff. So watch this space. I think there's going to be some important developments here. This next one, again, hearkening back to Dr. Borowitz's article. This next one, Oracle, understanding cislunar satellite images poses AFRL's biggest challenge. AFRL is Air Force Research Lab, right? So what they want to do is they want to build some satellites in these halo orbits similar to what Gateway is, so they can see the front side and the back side of the moon, but also to kind of patrol what they're calling, I'm going to read this, AFRL initiated its project to prototype a satellite originally called Cislunar Highway Patrol Satellite CHIPS back in 2020, designed to track other satellites, spacecraft, and debris in an area of space expected to become more crowded over the next couple of decades. The lab announced on November the name change to Oracle in tandem with a $72 million contract awarded to Colorado startup Advanced Space with partners General Atomics and Leidos. So that's amazing. And I'm pretty sure, if I'm right, Advanced Space is the same group that that launched Capstone a few months ago, which was really the first kickoff of the adventure to go back to the moon. So I'm going to have to look that up and be sure of that. But that's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big deal. Should all go to plan, Oracle will occupy a strategic point in space that would allow it to see the comings and goings in cislunar space better than Earth-bound telescopes or Earth-orbiting satellites. One big challenge for the lab and its industry teammates includes figuring out how to keep the satellite in a halo orbit around L1 Lagrange point between the Earth and the moon. That's really important. And by the way, that's where we want to be, right? That's where we want to place our lunar elevator, in that spot. So Pretty cool that there's some work there. I'll just tell you, we proposed a mission very similar to this back in 2018 and again in 2019 and again in 20. No, we didn't propose it in 2020. That was the pandemic and we stopped doing that. But 18 and 19, 2018 and 19, we proposed a really similar mission. So glad for my friends to get this thing accepted. Really wish it had been us because we had something a little bit different in mind, but still pretty cool. Okay. Let's change gears. One more thing regarding that article by Dr. Borowitz. Let's see it right here. So this is just the Wikipedia article referring to the Artemis Accords. They've got 28 countries and one territory have signed the accords. Curiously, and that's just as of 3 days ago. Argentina is the most recent one, and there are some interesting political ramifications from Argentina signing. So this is the world focused on Artemis Accords. I've seen a map recently that showcases the folks signing up for the Chinese program to build out their lunar observatory settlement. And it's China, Russia, I think it's somebody else over here, I forget where, but there's about 5 countries that have signed on. So pretty interesting. A few countries have actually signed both. I don't remember who, so I'll have to look that one up. Yeah, so all that's kind of coming off of Dr. Borowitz's article. So definitely worth looking at this. Keeping that in mind, we're going to showcase some documents that have come out. I'm gonna go way deeper into this, but the future of the global space economy. We're going to dig into this a little bit here. Before we do, I want to share a couple more pieces of news. This bipartisan bill designates space as critical infrastructure. We've been trying to get this for a while. This is actually a repost of a bill that was proposed last year and the year before. Maybe it's got a chance of going through. The Space Infrastructure Act would direct the Homeland Security Secretary to designate space systems, services, and technology as a sector of critical infrastructure. It's bipartisan, which is great. Don't see a lot of that these days. The government currently recognizes 16 infrastructure sectors as critical, such as water, energy, communications, and financial services. The space industry, consequently, has had to, quote, rely on collecting threat and security information from a patchwork of the 16 sectors. The bill is meant to ensure that space gets its own cogent security analysis of the space-based assets upon which our society relies. I gotta tell you, I'm so glad that somebody is paying attention to this. I do think that the United States and the global Western economy relies on space data, and if we start losing that infrastructure, we are in big trouble. Space is infrastructure. So many things we rely on, such as navigation systems, banking, and communication systems, function with the help of technology in space. Designating space as a critical infrastructure sector would help ensure the industry receives the attention and resources it needs, thereby strengthening our national security. So we've been pushing for this for a long time. It's nice to see that somebody else seems to be pushing for it. But again, this is a rehash of a bill that was proposed last year that did not get approved, did not get passed. So these are the sectors. This is what we've got. Commercial facilities, communications, chemicals, dams, defense industrial base, manufacturing, emergency services, energy, financial services, healthcare, government facility, food and agriculture, information technology, nuclear reactors, materials and waste, transportation, and water and wastewater. So those are the systems that Homeland Security deems critical infrastructure. And it would be great if they added, just one more bullet right in here and called it space, right? I think it's super important. I think it's long overdue, and hopefully, fingers crossed, these representatives are going to get this bill passed. So that's what we want. Okay. More news. Oops. Hey, what just happened here? Nope. I have known the author of this article for a really long time. I really like Larry David. He has been posting at space.com since I started in the space sector. So my very first public space event, even before I decided to get involved with the space elevator, I was still researching whether or not I would get involved at all. And Leonard David was at a Mars Society event, or maybe it was National Space Society. It could have been either one. But that's how I met him, and he's been reporting on the news of space for 40 years. First person authority. He has been talking to astronauts since the earliest days. One of my favorite memories was going out to the X Prize launch, and I was his guest. I was the cameraman, for lack of a better phrase, to get out on the airfield and be a part of that incredible moment. So have a lot of respect for Leonard David. Recently, he just posted this a day ago. Moon mining gains momentum as private companies plan for a lunar economy. Right? We just saw that phrase, cislunar economy, a few minutes ago. It's been around for a while now. Leonard David is talking about it as well. There was a event that just happened in Golden, Colorado a little while ago. Let me read it. The pace is quickening for using Earth's moon as a near-term go-to location to live on land and explore. As NASA's Artemis program moves forward, so too do long-term plans by small and large firms, academia, along with international space agencies. A record attendance of some 250 participants spoke at on lunar economic models, results of in-the-lab tests, and legal and policy issues. A number of entrepreneurial groups shared their strategies to turn the moon into a hustle and bustle world of marketable services. I'm pretty sure that our friends Melissa and Vince from Off Planet Research were there. This is at the School of Mines Space Resources Roundtable. I remember that she was going to go on a trip, and I'm pretty sure this is where she landed. Great articles. Super useful, talking about resource utilization. That's a pretty cool graphic there. I had no idea it was the 23rd meeting of this Space Resources Roundtable. That was a surprise to me. Uh, the professor writes a little bit about it. I think, yeah, future priorities. For its part, NASA has been blueprinting a long-term vision for ISRU, in situ resource utilization, or using the materials that you find where you find them. The space agency has been hammering out goals, objectives, and flagging knowledge gaps in lunar science and the technologies required for making ISRU a dependable reality. Furthermore, NASA is sorting out its job while it's also scoping out how best to engage industry and draw upon non-aerospace industry talent. So pretty neat. It's fantastic to kind of see this stuff taking shape, right? All the folks from Intuitive Machines were there. They're probably going to have the next robot on the ground, so that's going to be fun. I love this, McMurdo on the moon. If you're not aware, McMurdo is the Antarctic research station down at the bottom of the world. I love this graphic of it, and I like the idea of taking this and placing an equal city-sized system on the moon. I just think that's fabulous. The moon is still the right place to go. Pick a place and you build up infrastructure, because that's how you get your foothold. Just love the idea of building out a giant research site on the moon. So pretty fun. That's really cool. Like seeing that stuff happen. Somebody sent this to me, and I think it's pretty fun. It's not a topic we talk about very often, so just give me a second. We talk about. Oops. Just a moment. Just a moment. We talk about the infrastructure space, policy, commercialization. Somebody was asking, what if you die in space? What happens if somebody dies? I don't know this author. I don't know their credentials. But there's no question that sending human beings to space is extraordinarily difficult and a perilous proposition. Since human space exploration began just over 60 years ago, 20 people have died. 14 in the NASA Space Shuttle tragedies of 86 and 2003, 3 cosmonauts during the 1971 Soyuz 11 mission, and 3 astronauts in the Apollo 1 launch pad fire in 1967. So seriously, there's been nearly 700 people that have gone to space, and only 20 of them died. Now, I'd say those are pretty good odds. Maybe not great odds, but pretty darn good odds. So they talk in this article about, if you die, what happens if you're on the way at the space station, right? That's one circumstance. If you're to and from the moon, that's a different circumstance. And it gets really complicated if you're heading to and from Mars, right? So pretty interesting. It's kind of fun. It's a little on the fluffy side. It's definitely meant for a different audience than we normally have, but still thought it was a pretty clever thing to share with y'all. On the not so good, not so great things to share with y'all, you all know that we've been monitoring Starship right from the beginning. We've been monitoring, SpaceX, and I've been saying for a while now that SpaceX has a history of not exactly playing by the established rules, right? And for the one side, they're really good at sending things up, letting them blow up, figuring out what happened wrong, and fixing them, right? That's their mode of operation, right? However, they're definitely not playing by the same rules, and they built this quote. SpaceX ran a full pressure test of a new flame deflector system at Starship's Super Heavy launch site in South Texas on Friday. However, CNN has learned that the company never applied for the environmental permits that would allow it to discharge industrial processed wastewater into the area surrounding the launch pad as normally required by the Federal Clean Water Act. The flame deflector, or huge water deluge, is meant to diffuse heat, sound, and energy generated by orbital test flights and launches of the company's largest rocket ever. All right, so I don't know if you've seen this video. We're going to show this. I hope we can go through here. That's a lot of stuff going on there. And I think that just a few months ago, they didn't have any sort of water trenches or heat trenches, flame trenches, and they blew up a very big chunk of their launch facility, right? Concrete and plaster was just sandblasted the area for hundreds of feet, half a mile. Damage in the parking lot, damage to the superstructures around it, damage to the infrastructure nearby. I think you can see some tanks here that are not very far away. There's a new fence you can see in this image. So, right, they're like, okay, well, we learned our lesson. That was a hard way to learn it. It was an expensive way to learn it. So, okay, let's put in some flame trenches and water. Okay, cool. Everything makes sense. Except for, let me reiterate, the company never applied for the environmental permits that would allow it to discharge industrial processed wastewater into the area surrounding the launch pad. That is the same mistake they keep making. They keep making the EPA angry by not following the rules. The rules are out there. They're there for a reason. They're pretty good rules, in my opinion, and they didn't file anything with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. SpaceX had not applied for what is called a Texas Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. Like, who would have thought that it was going to be the EPA that kind of stopped Starship from flying? But this has been an ongoing problem. This was the problem with the first launches, the first tests, the second test, and now this most recent test. From the Texas group, a regulator told CNBC, the regulator recommends, stressing that word recommends, applications be submitted at least 330 days. God, I hope that's a typo. 330 days before the proposed construction of a wastewater treatment facility. Well, this is not a wastewater treatment facility, so I'm hoping that those rules do not apply. But look, SpaceX has got lawyers, right? They've got a relationship with the FAA, the FCC, State Department, the U.S. military. They've got NOAA, NASA. They've got all these governmental relationships at the very highest levels, but they keep making this same fixable mistake. So it's just a shocking amount of water, and it's a simple error that they could have gotten right. So a little frustrated with that, little disappointed in that. But I have a special clip here. Just give me a second. Stop. Wait. Just a moment. All right. We're going to share this. Isn't that wild? This is our friends at News and Space. I'm going to post the link in a second. This is that water system, kind of from I'm going to call it a rocket's eye view. That's pretty remarkable. I really don't know how we got an image like this, a video like this, but I'm going to post a link to it. There's this. That one's the full speed one, and then this is the half speed one. But that is a lot of water coming out. I just kind of I think I saw it was 350,000 gallons or some crazy number like that. I don't have that number verified, but I think it's pretty neat, all right? And especially for a company that just called a few months ago are like, we don't need to worry about this. This isn't a problem. I want to think about how this impacts on the other side of the system. So, theoretically, get up here, get into low Earth orbit, have a bunch of refuel missions, get out to the moon, land on the moon. If you're going to do that much damage in Earth's atmosphere, how much damage are you going to do in the very fragile lunar environment? So I really want to question that. I really am, somewhat concerned about that. What if this rocket has this much of an impact down here on the ground with a heavy atmosphere, right? There's 16 pounds of atmosphere if you're at sea level. What is that exhaust plume going to do to the fragile environment of the moon? And I'm not talking about the atmosphere, which is super, 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 super thin. I'm talking about sandblasting, rock and debris. If it goes half a mile or a mile here on the ground of Earth, 1/6 the gravity implies it's going to go 6 times as far, right? So maybe even higher, farther than that. Now that I think about it. So it would be really, really great to have SpaceX compliant with the rules, so that we can get our Starship up, because we all want this thing to fly. We all do. I don't want this to sound like I'm being negative. I really want this thing to fly, but I think it's really basic that they have their legal team on top of these problems, because they know the EPA is watching them. They know it. It's been an ongoing thing for more than a year. So just follow the rules and get your flight flying. Okay. I'm going to switch gears again. And this is where we're going to spend kind of the rest of the afternoon. There's 2 reports. I talked about this the other day. This is the Pew Research, Pew Trust, and how the views of Americans in the priorities of NASA and the impacts of private companies. I talked about this a couple days ago. There were 10,000 respondents to this. Nearly 70% say it's essential for America to be a leader in space exploration. We know that that's been out there, but this I thought was interesting. Americans' engagement in space. 47% of Americans say they have done at least 1 of 4 space-related activities in the last year, including 26 who say they've looked at an image from space telescopes such as the James Webb. That's a lot higher than I ever remember engaging in space. I did not think it was that high. So 1 in 4 Americans is a pretty big deal who looked at SpaceX, and almost half have done something. So that's a remarkable number. Um, this one kind of kills me a little bit. 55% of Americans think that people will routinely travel in space as tourists in the next 50 years. 2073, that seems so shockingly far in advance, far from here. It is really hard to understand that. Excuse me, sorry, sneezed. Don't know what caused that. Debris from space, debris in space from rockets will be a major problem. 70% think it's going to be a major problem. People will build colonies on other planets. Only a third of people said that. In 50 years, I would like to see the other 2/3 of those people absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. This one is a little spooky though. The U.S. military will fight against other nations in space. It's 44 to 54% there, and that's in the next 50 years. I wonder, of these 10,000 respondents, how many of them are aware that it's space data that is keeping the very asymmetric fight between Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that is space data keeping Ukraine alive. So as far as I'm concerned, uh, there's already using space data for a fight down here on the ground. I wonder how long or if or when or how this quote, the US military will fight against other nations in space. I hope that is a lot farther away than 2073, but I do think that maybe definitions of this are probably pretty important. This kills me. I don't understand this. I genuinely don't. Americans place monitoring asteroids that could hit Earth at top of NASA's priority list. 60% of these people said it was the top priority to monitor asteroids. I said this a couple days ago before I really dug into this report. I went to Capitol Hill back in 2004 and 2005, two different times, those 2 years. And we were trying to get people to pay attention to the asteroid threat. And nobody wanted to hear that. Nobody did. So it's pretty shocking to me that this is a real priority now. Half of the people want to make sure that we are monitoring Earth's atmosphere, Earth's climate. So I think that's pretty important. And only 11% think it's worthwhile to send people to Mars, and only 1% more, 12%, want to send people to the moon. This has big political ramifications, right? Combined, sending people to the moon and Mars is slightly more than a third of the people who want to monitor asteroids. So that's a pretty big deal, and there will be political fallout from this one. I think. I just have a guess about that. Most Americans think NASA is cool. They should. That's especially good. The last thing I'm gonna talk about is this piece. Republicans and Democrats have much in common in their views on the U.S. role in space and NASA priorities, but differ on monitoring Earth's climate. This makes so much sense, right? Most of us agree NASA should be going out doing some cool stuff. Most of us agree that the U.S. should have a leading role in space. I think that's pretty straightforward. it doesn't surprise me that there's a difference between the Republicans and Democrats on climate change, right? We've seen that divide for the last 10, 15 years now, getting more and more and more bitter and angry. But yeah, it's really cool. I think this report, I don't know who's going to read this in political circles. I hope that people do. I thought this was pretty fascinating. So I'm going to recommend that y'all take a minute to download this and read it, because there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. And in our last 10 minutes, I'm going to show something that only came to my attention just a few hours ago when I was prepping for this show. So yes, it's in German. Just that's it's a German consultancy that is putting together this Space 2040, the future of global space economy, the English version. I took German in high school. I did. I was terrible at it. I promised my teacher I would never take German again. I faithfully upheld that promise. I don't know anything about this company, not one thing. So I don't want to vouch for them. But I was pretty impressed. If you go through and if you give them your email address, they're going to send you this report. It's 133 pages. I mean, it is a no joke report. I was very surprised by this thing. Before we go into it, I think everybody who knows me knows I don't look at the report until I look at the bibliography, super important. Who are they taking information from? What are their sources? What are their source material? And then I also take a look at critical people, right? Let me just, so the bibliography is good. The bibliography is solid. And then, okay, working backwards in their people, who are their consultants on this? I don't know some of these people. Of course, we all know Dr. Robert Zubrin, president of Pioneer Astronautics. What it doesn't say is also, the founder of the Mars Society. So, we all know he is, quote, the driving force between the Mars Direct proposal, which aims to significantly reduce the cost and complexity of the mission to Mars. All right, so he's been out there. I don't know some of these people. Bas Lansrup, a little bit infamous there because he was the co-founder of the Mars One program. Certainly hats off to him for his ambition. As a guy who has tried to build big ideas and gotten severely smacked down by those big ideas, I'm going to try to be a little sympathetic to Lansrup. But solid credentials, solid credentials. I've heard of Amelie in the ESA Astronaut Reserve. A couple other people. Jim Caravala, I've known for probably 15 years, maybe more than that. An ISUer, CEO of Offworld, a company that develops and operates robots for industrial applications on Earth and in space. He's a pretty remarkable guy. He definitely knows his stuff. Rob Meyerson, I've had, fortunately, I'll do a little bit of bragging. I've had dinner with Jim Caravala. I've had dinner with Robert Zubrin. I've had dinner with Rob Meyerson. We had pizza together. Meyerson is the founder and CEO of Delaloon Space, a company focused on developing infrastructure for human exploration and settlement of space. He previously served as the president of Blue Origin, where he played a key role in developing the company's New Shepard and New Glenn launch vehicles. Yeah, so Meyerson is a total badass in space. So super impressed by him. He grew Blue from employee number, I think he's employee number 21 to more than 6,000. So pretty remarkable guy. So that's what I do. First thing I do before I even read the report is like, who are the people in this thing, right? So given that, there are really good people in this thing. So then, all right, now I'm going back to the front of the document here. Beautiful graphics, absolutely beautiful graphics. Little nitpick, a spacesuit cannot have your hair flowing. This is not a spacesuit anymore. This is just a shell. If your neck is exposed, it's not a spacesuit anymore. So I'm like, really, that's such a amateur error. But anyway, I love the graphics of this. I really do. I've been very impressed by this document. It's fascinating reading. It speaks to the point that I've been saying for a while, is that we don't have a good map to the future. So they're looking out to 2040, like, okay, right, what does that look like? But they've got some of the big parts here. Starship and reusable mega launchers as key enablers, digital twin or remote physical work in space, nuclear power, space-based solar power, experimental level. What kind of infrastructure are we talking about? Space mining. I have not ever agreed with helium-3 on the moon, unlikely by 2040. I love seeing that. I think that's very accurate. Private space stations are super important. I think that's going to be a really big deal. So, what are the politics of going into space? What does this space race between the U.S. and China look like in actuality? I think there's really something here, right? It's interesting that they have not a space economy, but a space ecology section. So space debris, Kessler syndrome, traffic management, disruption of astronomy from mega constellations, climate crisis as a driver for the space economy. This section actually surprised me. There was not a lot that surprised me, but this section actually surprised me. I wanted to kind of dig into it further. This section about space exploration, this moon base versus lunar settlement, that's actually a super important concept that deserves attention. The moon base is the next step towards multiplanetary civilization. I mean, I love concepts like that. This space economy, growth beyond $1 trillion. Well, we just learned a couple days ago, $548 billion economy, $548 billion space economy now. That's where we are now. We're $500 billion, more than $500 billion now. So to say it's going to grow beyond $1 trillion in 17 years, that is a very safe bet. I think that number is going to be substantially higher. My friend Peter Gerritsen, once talked to me about there's going to be a day when the off-Earth economy is bigger than the on-Earth economy. Now, I think that's a long ways away, but I think it's very doable. I think that's definitely going to happen. So every major company will need a space strategy. That goes back to exactly what I said at the beginning of our conversation, where I said everybody was a .com company in the beginning, at the end of the 90s, and by 2010, nobody was a .com company. They were just a company with a .com strategy. Well, that's going to be true here. Major companies will need a space strategy. And this next part, from space to Earth, transitioning to space economy, that's going to be really important. So these are the business models they're talking about: satellite internet, Earth observation, space tourism, consultancies, traffic management, construction monitoring and planning, debris removal, supply chain tracking and route optimization. That I hadn't seen. I hadn't thought about that one before. Agriculture, space MRO, ride sharing for spacecraft, private space stations, manufacturing, lunar infrastructure, trading used spacecraft. That one I didn't see coming. Point-to-point transport, in situ resource utilization, computing in space, and materials for construction in space. Pretty fascinating. Nobody on this model credits the lunar elevator infrastructure, but private space stations, traffic back and forth. I think that's really interesting. So this is their report. I do think it is a fascinating read. I'm going to share the link, although I'm not sure you can get it without a registration. So bear with me here. But this goes back to my comment that the industry needs documents like this, forward-looking documents that imagine the future, but imagine the future with data. So I want to do something kind of like this, but a little bit different, that has data. So we'll see how that goes. All right, and with that, we're going to close out. Thanks everybody for being a part of this. Fascinating look at the week's news. We'll see you on Wednesday. We've got a guest on Wednesday, another one on Monday, another one on Monday after that. Tomorrow we've got Jeff Kruken on the Pioneers of Space Commercialization. That's the Space Frontier Foundation show. So join us for that. All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.